Zusha, welcome to Retro Podcast. This is the first episode of our special event we have this month, and I'm very curious to know what you do. So, what exactly is it that you do for a living?
Well, firstly, Ben, thank you so much for having me. Um, what I do for a living is I like to say I shoot people just because it always makes people like give a funny look. And then I'm like, yeah, no, I'm actually a photographer. But it's a little corny, but I do celebrity photography, and I guess my headline is photographer creating winning images for celebrities and business executives. So that's headshots, portraits, editorial, press release, pretty much anything human, a little bit of fashion, mainly humans.
Hmm. And have you what has been the top biggest clients that you've had on your resume?
So the through multiple channels, Deadline Hollywood, publicists, um, I would have to name how many are you looking for? How many names? Because
Oh,
I
it
can go
doesn't
on.
matter.
Okay. Selena Gomez, Ben Stiller, Tiffany Haddish, Samuel L. Jackson, Sydney Sweeney, uh, Miles Teller.
That's
I mean,
impressive.
I can go on, so I don't know what to say. I'm very blessed. Thank you. I'm very blessed. Yeah.
Very cool. Have you
So,
seen the new movie that Sydney Sweeney is in with her co-star Glen Powell?
you know what's crazy? It's on my watch list. I have not seen it. I actually just
Oh my God.
ran into Glenn last 2 weeks ago, but no, I have not seen it. But I'm a supporter of both of them. I think they're very talented, and I love both of them, and they're amazing.
Movie's hilarious.
But I've seen clips like people posted it here and there on TikTok, and I'm like, okay, I want to watch that. I got to get on that, but I haven't had the chance to. I've just been working on this project that I just launched, so I haven't really had the chance to. But no, it's on my watch list.
Understood.
Yeah,
Well, if you have Netflix, it's on Netflix.
good to know. I do. I'll have to sit down and watch it. Yeah, I have to just make the time, you know?
My mother likes Glen Powell, but I tried to introduce her to the movie and I said to her, it's no different from the movie Ticket to Paradise, except the only difference is in Ticket to Paradise, you have both George Clooney and Julia Roberts trying to stop their daughter from getting married, where in oh shoot, I just had a brain fart. But in the movie that both Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell are in, uh, Anyone But You, that's the name of the movie. Anyone But You.
Anyone but you. Right.
And the difference in that one is that both Glen Powell and Sweeney went on a date, didn't go well. 2 years later, they run into each other. They're both going to their sister friend's wedding vacation, and Glen Powell and Sweeney are trying to pretend to be a happy couple so they don't ruin the moment for both their friend and their sister.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
no, I love those type of rom-coms. There's a lot of overlap when it comes to um romantic comedies, but then again, you're going in it for the comedy, for the feel good, for
Mhm.
predictability, right? So, um it's its own genre, and I'm appreciative of it.
And you said you were working on a project recently.
Yes, so for the past half a year, I've been working on a campaign and exhibit with the Jewish Journal and Jews Talk Justice titled Artists Against Anti-Semitism. And what it is it's a coalition of artists who are using art to stand up against anti-Semitism and to spread good in the world.
Well done.
And so we just had the launch of our first campaign exhibit, and it was this past Monday evening, May 6th, Yom HaShoah in West Hollywood. And some of the names from it include Tiffany Haddish, Deborah Messing, Juliana Margulies, Paul Walter Hauser, amongst a lot of others. And there's been a lot of blessings with it. It's I'm seeing the visceral impact that it's having, and we're just getting started, and it was a success. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm very excited um, to continue on
Mhm.
this movement. But it
And
was a lot of work. Yeah.
for this campaign, is it both an online campaign or an in-person campaign?
So regarding the campaign of Artists Against Anti-Semitism, it's both. Regarding this specific exhibit launch, we had like a one night invite only industry event, and now on social media we have all the talent um who are a part of the campaign. They posted it all over their social medias with a similar wording and hashtags and similar messaging, trying to garner as much traction as possible and raise as much awareness, um, showing Jewish kids that they don't stand alone and there's people who have their backs. And um, we're gonna stand up to hate.
Very good, very good. And if I'm allowed to say this, there's been for almost a year, there's been some situations going on in Gaza. What were your thoughts
Right.
about hearing that news?
Regarding, are you referring to what happened in October, like the whole thing that's happening
Yeah.
now? Okay, so obviously it's very complicated situation, very complex, a lot of tragedy all around. Um, my thoughts on the subject are, well, it's a heavy discussion, but I'll try to make it brief. So I
Mhm.
personally was in Israel on October 7th. It was the happiest day of the Jewish year, and we were celebrating, and then that turned into obviously a tragedy where 1,200 innocent civilians were murdered at the music festival, and hostages were taken, and I was running to bomb shelters. It was just my personal experience. It was obviously horrific, and every single Jewish person has at least a friend, a family member, or a friend who has a friend or family member who was either murdered or taken hostage or was deeply affected by that. Um, that was my personal experience with October 7th, and obviously the months after that in the US, just the amount of anti-Semitism that is present is it's not okay. And regarding what's happening right now with the war, obviously all war is tragic, it's heartbreaking, and the images you see coming out of Gaza, I mean, it's heartbreaking. There's not really much else to say about it. Obviously, I have a lot of empathy for the people in Gaza. I'm not at all happy about this. Every single person I know, wants this war to end, and the suffering, it's undeserved. And I believe that the only path forward is coexistence. Both groups are not going anywhere, and both groups need to come to a resolution. There is no peace without both Israelis and Palestinians because both groups are living there, and that's the reality of the situation. And I think for this current war to end, Hamas needs to surrender and release the hostages, and we really need to work on a two-state solution where we're building up economic resources in Gaza and giving them a better life and ensuring Israel has security at the same time. And that's what they deserve. They deserve sovereignty and human rights, of course, and Israelis deserve security and to live in peace. And that's anyone who's not channeling for this to be the path moving forward can claim to be pro-peace, but they're not. And I'll actually say one more thing on this. If you look at all the college campus protests that are happening right now, and a lot of the protests, they, I mean, they're saying slogans like, we don't want two states, we want 48. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Those are genocidal slogans, intifada revolution. People don't know what an intifada actually means. Sure, the name can be uprising, but what does it actually translate to? Let's look at what happened at the intifadas in Israel, the first and second rounds, and you'll see that it's anything from peaceful resolution. So if you really are pro-peace, you would say, no, I'm pro-peace. I'm pro the humanitarian ceasefire. I'm pro removing Hamas. I'm pro two-state solution. You wouldn't be out there screaming, you want a ceasefire, but then you also want to globalize the intifada, which means basically murder all the Jewish people. So I think there's a lot of inconsistency, and obviously, not everyone who is part of the pro-Palestine protests are anti-Semitic, but unfortunately, they're kind of very connected. And until they sort out the anti-Semitism problem within their movement, I am not being a part of that. Obviously, every Jewish person I know is pro-Palestine in the sense where you want them to have their rights and sovereignty and to live in peace. but the movement and what's happening right now, it's not okay. And there's anti-Semitism deeply embedded into it, and it's not safe for Jews, honestly. So that's my thoughts on the whole thing, and I'm just praying for peace, honestly.
Very good, very good. And when you said that you were praying for peace for this to end, would your thoughts be the same way for the situation that's still going on in Ukraine with Russia at the moment? Because there's also a situation going on with Ukraine and Russia, kind of like what's going on in Israel. Would would you have the same thoughts on that one as well?
So I'm much more knowledgeable about the geopolitical region of Israel-Palestine than I am of Ukraine and Russia. But as far as I know, obviously Ukraine um, is fighting for their independence and their right to sovereignty. And um, I believe all humans have right to fight for sovereignty and to live in peace. And so I I mean, I truthfully don't know so much about that specific war, and even though my dad's actually Ukrainian, and that part of the world, I do have to get more educated on that topic. I think I'm going to refrain from commenting on that conflict only because I don't think it's valid for me to have a real opinion if I'm not educated on that part of the world and the conflict, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And for people that want to go into photography, well, first off, how did you get started?
So I got started around 6 years ago. I was in high school and I was about to get my diploma, and I said, you know, I'm not going to college. I want to pursue photography and I want to move to LA. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I want to move to LA and I want to pursue photography and work within Hollywood. And I had to devise a plan because I grew up with not that much money, to put it mildly, and the youngest of 11 siblings from an ultra-Orthodox Jewish family in Brooklyn. So I had to figure out how I'm going to plan my journey. And obviously, a lot of it was learn as I go, but I definitely set up certain actionable steps to ensure I would reach my goals. And that was kind of my mindset. It's like if you want it hard enough, you're gonna figure it out. And I figured out what I needed to do every day to ensure that I got to where I wanted to be. And obviously there's elements of luck and there's elements that are out of your control. And I do have a lot of blessings. But I also work very hard. So that's kind of how I got here.
Well, it's really amazing what you do with your career, especially with building all these connections. Like, do you remember the first person that reached out to you or put in a recommendation, how you got this big gig? Do you remember the first big gig you had?
So I guess the first like big gig I had was with Charlie D'Amelio, Dixie D'Amelio, Heidi D'Amelio, Mark D'Amelio, the D'Amelio family. Very, very, very nice people. They're the first people to work with me and, I guess give me a chance if you would. And it was very fun. They're such good people, and it was a little surreal, obviously, because we were all, it was actually right before COVID. We were all watching them on TikTok, and I really thought that like I can tell that they were good people, and I felt for them as a family because the amount of just hate they were receiving and all these different horrible things, and I just I thought they were very relatable, and so I really wanted to work with them, and they were the first like celebrity you could say that I worked with, and from there a lot more opportunity came, and then a lot of perfecting my craft and a lot of networking and a lot of blessings. And that was in 2020. Yeah, so 4 years later, and we're here. So yeah,
Have you met the Elgort family by any chance?
Elgort like Ansel.
Yeah, his sister Sophie, who is on the podcast for season one, she's a photographer like you.
Very cool. I did not know that, and I did not know that he had a sister. And I have not met them. No,
Well, you
haven't had
could
the pleasure.
definitely tell they're related because I remember meeting Sophie and I was like, yeah, I could definitely see the resemblance.
Really?
Yeah. One of the
No,
nicest
that's
people
awesome.
I've had on my podcast, but yeah, you could definitely see the resemblance. And we are coming
That's
to the
amazing.
end of the interview. And what is the best advice you would pass on to people that want to go into the industry?
Great question. I do love that question. I would say it depends which part of the industry you're looking to break into. I will say that do the best you could to be meticulous in your craft and to be detail oriented and just become the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. At the same time, this world, and especially Hollywood, it is not a meritocracy. Put a heavy, heavy emphasis on networking, being authentic, being fun to be around, and to create your own opportunities. But also, don't be a social climbing faker. Like people can see through that. No one wants to work with you when you're it's like you meet someone at an event and you hear that they're an entertainment lawyer, they're not an agent, and then you just turn away from them and that you're being rude. It's like what the hell? That's in my opinion that's disgusting and that's not a very nice thing to do. But very um present here in LA, unfortunately. So just be a good person and network and be good at what you do and look for opportunity, create opportunity, think out of the box, never self-reject and always just reach out to people just go at it and you're going to receive 1,000 no's. Everyone says it and it's cliche and it's cheesy but it's true. You're going to receive 1,000 no's for this project that I just launched. The amount of no's that I received, it hurts, but you just got to pick yourself up and say, okay, that's one step closer. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get the next person. And that's what I did. And I've even had some really big names, which I can't mention, fall through last minute, which were extremely disappointing. But that's life and that's the industry. So you got to just keep going.
Exactly. And this is a retro show. And did you have a favorite retro product growing up? Could be from board games, video games, film, toys.
There was this old, well, it's not old, it's all relative, I'm only 25, but there was this like 1980s, late 80s giant video camera that my dad had. And so my oldest sibling is 41. So some of my siblings would go around filming with it when I was much younger. And that always stood out to me. And that was like, I think my first introduction to the concept of like video filmmaking and cameras. And then when I was a little bit older, my siblings got a Canon point and shoot. That's not retro, but the video camera would have to be, would that classify the 80s? Is that retro? Is that retro
Of
enough?
course, 80s is 80s, 70s, 90s, early 2000s, you name it. That does the retro
Right,
perspective.
right. Yeah, no, but that would have to be it. How about you?
Oh, me? I'd say the little Star Wars figures from the 70s when the first Star Wars movie came out. I actually own two of them, and that's Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. They have the lightsabers that you push out of their arms.
Wow. No, that's incredible. It's hard to think sometimes. Like I just watched Star Wars again a few months ago, and it's hard to think that these movies came out in the 70s because well they're timeless and iconic and they're so good. It's so enjoyable and it's hard to think about that. Not in a bad way, just you forget, you
Yeah.
forget that they're it's not like they came out 10 years ago. So no, but I love Star Wars and that's really cool. Good for you.
No, but by next year it would have been 10 years since Force Awakens came out,
Is it already 10 years?
which is hard to believe because
Oh my God, that's
it's just hard to believe
wild.
it's been 10 years because I just realized that it was also 10 years ago since we lost our favorite comedian, Robin Williams.
It's been wow.
10 years.
I can't believe it. It's time flies so quickly.
It does.
I feel like I just went to theater for Force Awakens. How is it 10 years already? Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's
Uh,
intense.
I watched Alien for the first time, and that came out in the late 70s, which around the same time as Star Wars did.
Interesting. I don't know if I watched Alien. Is
Alien,
that
it's Sigourney Weaver, like Sigourney Weaver when she was young, and
right?
it's basically a horror story in outer space. It's a sci-fi horror story, and it's basically her and these astronauts. It takes place in the future. They're on a ship. They're on a mission. one of the astronauts accidentally brings an alien back to the ship, and the alien lays an egg, and that egg is a creature called a xenomorph, and the creature grows into a killer alien, and all the astronauts are dead except Sigourney Weaver. So it's Sigourney Weaver on a ship trying to get off from the xenomorph. She's trying to survive the ship. She's the only one left on the ship.
Interesting. It does sound very interesting. I think I didn't watch it because I don't love horror movies. I love thrillers, and sometimes I don't know if you can consider A Quiet Place and Bird Box and Thanksgiving horror, but those type of horror movies I enjoy. But that's
Oh
more
my
thriller, I think.
God. Thanksgiving was terrifying.
Well, it was, but it was more just gory
Yeah,
and disgusting in that way. I mean, I loved it, but it was just very gory. I didn't. It was
yeah,
less
that's why.
eerie. In my opinion, true horror is psychological, and that I don't watch because I mean I don't want to be messed with. I have too much going on in my life that I'm like I already have enough horror. I don't need to watch it. Why do this to myself? You know, a lot of people they watch horror, and I'm
Yeah.
like okay, each to their own. You know.
Jump scares aren't a problem. It's gore that I can't watch because if I see gore, I'm gonna vomit.
So you haven't watched Game of Thrones.
No. And won't. Nope, nope, nope.
Well, no, Game of Thrones is my favorite show of all time. I absolutely love it. But
I haven't
I
seen The
feel you.
Boys
It's not for
either.
everybody. The Boys is also great, very gory.
Yeah, that's why.
Um, but yeah, no, those are definitely not the shows for you if you don't like gore or violence. Um, but sometimes you can just fast forward.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
it's funny. Horror movies used to bother me because of jump scares. I used to be terrified of jump scares, but then I wrote a horror film and it no longer bothers me. So I'm immune to jump scares.
it's like exposure therapy or something.
Exactly. I watched Scream 6 in the movie theater for the first time when it came out last year. Yeah, not a problem. Nope.
Right. Yeah. It's also let's be real. Whenever there's jump scares, you know when they're coming. Like that, it's suddenly the score stops. And you're like, okay, now it's gonna be a jump score. Maybe don't make the score stop, and then I'll be terrified. I don't know.
Well, Zusha, thank you again for joining today's episode. I'm glad you could take your time to have this conversation and wish you the best with your campaign.
Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate you having me, and it's so great to meet you.
You as well.